The espresso machine hissed like an angry whisper behind the counter of Trattoria Luna as Friday night stretched past 11. The restaurant pulsed with noise, laughter, clinking glasses, and the rich scent of basil and wine. Naomi Blake moved through it all like a shadow, quick, efficient, invisible. She'd perfected the art of smiling without feeling it. 2 jobs, 7 days a week, no rest, no room for mistakes, just bills, tips, and the quiet ache of dreams she didn't have time to chase. New York City had promised her a future when she arrived from Atlanta 3 years ago. A life filled with words and meaning, built on translation and poetry. Instead, she was translating menus for tourists and invoices for suppliers while pouring Chianti for people who didn't know her name. Her grandmother used to tell her, "Don't let the world make you small, Naomi." But lately, small felt safe. Small paid rent. Then, one cold October night, everything changed. The door opened, and in walked the man who would rewrite her rhythm without saying a word. He didn't just enter, he arrived. A gust of wind followed him in, carrying the smell of rain and something darker. Conversations paused. Even the music seemed to bend for him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked both effortless and intentional. Every step was slow, deliberate, a man used to owning space simply by existing in it. His name, though Naomi didn't know it yet, was Dante Rossi, a man whispered about in circles that knew how to keep secrets. He sat at the corner table, the one reserved for men who tipped in hundreds and left behind silence. Naomi didn't want to notice him, but she did. The way he carried stillness like power, the gold chain that caught the candlelight at his throat, the quiet command that said he wasn't here for dinner. He was here to be seen. She grabbed her notepad and forced on her polite smile, the kind that looked genuine from a distance. "Good evening," she said, steady but detached. "Can I start you with something to drink?" He looked up from his phone, and her breath caught. His eyes were dark, the kind of dark that didn't just see you, it studied you. "Brunello di Montalcino," he said, voice low, smooth, the faint trace of Italian softening each syllable. "The 2016 if you have it." "Of course, the most expensive bottle." Naomi nodded, jotting it down. "And for dinner?" "I'll need a few minutes." He didn't dismiss her rudely, he just dismissed her like a man who'd never been told no. She walked away, pretending her pulse wasn't racing, pretending his voice hadn't followed her back to the counter. Throughout the night, she felt him there. A quiet pulse in the room. When she brought the wine, he was on the phone, speaking Italian fast and sharp. Naomi caught fragments. Shipment, schedule, meeting. Words that didn't belong to the world she lived in. When she set his glass down, he finally looked at her again. "You're Italian," he said. "My grandmother was," she replied carefully. "Sicilian." His lips curved slightly. "That explains it." "Explains what?" "Your accent. You try to hide it, but it's still there." Naomi blinked, caught off guard. "You were listening?" "I was noticing," he corrected. Tone quiet but deliberate. "There's a difference." He leaned back, studying her again. Not like a man flirting, but like a man memorizing. "You understood everything I said on the phone, didn't you?" She hesitated. "I wasn't listening." He smiled then. Slow, dangerous, confident. "I prefer people who mind their own business," he said softly. "But tell me, Miss Blake, why is a woman like you working double shifts here when you could be doing something far more interesting?" Naomi's spine stiffened. She'd spent years swallowing words to keep customers happy. But his tone, calm, curious, almost patronizing, scraped something raw in her chest. "Rent," she said evenly. "Bills, survival, same reason most people do what they have to." He tilted his head. That faint smile still there. "Fair enough." And that was it. He turned away, back to his phone, as if she'd passed some small test without knowing it. Naomi walked off, muttering under her breath in her grandmother's dialect, the one she only ever used when she was tired enough to forget her filter. "Testa di ferro arrogante," arrogant iron head. It was barely a whisper. No one could have heard. Except he did. Dante looked up, his expression unreadable, amusement flickering in the corner of his mouth. What was that? He asked, voice like velvet wrapped around a threat. Naomi froze. Nothing. His grin deepened. Oh, it was something. He leaned back, eyes glinting. Say it again. She blinked. I don't think so. Then say it again, he murmured, but looking at me this time. The room around them blurred. Conversations faded. All she could hear was her heartbeat and that low, coaxing voice. So she met his eyes, dark, patient, unyielding, and said clearly, Testa di ferro arrogante. For a moment, silence stretched thin between them. Then he smiled, slow, deliberate, like he'd found something rare. Good, he said quietly. Don't ever apologize for that. And just like that, something in Naomi's world shifted. A pulse of danger, curiosity, and something she couldn't yet name. She didn't know it then, but that was the night the most unexpected story of her life began. The kind that starts with defiance and ends with everything you thought you'd never dare to want. Because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one glance, one word you never meant to say to change the direction of your entire life. Funny thing about life. Sometimes the words that slip out in frustration are the ones that get someone's full attention. Have you ever said something you didn't mean, only to realize it changed everything? Hey, before we continue, if you're feeling the story so far, please tap that subscribe button, drop a like, and share this with someone who loves deep stories too. And let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Now let's return to the moment everything changed. Naomi told herself she'd forget him by morning. After all, she'd served hundreds of people in that restaurant. Faces blurred together. Names disappeared by the end of every shift. But Dante Rossi wasn't a face you could forget. And the truth was, she hadn't slept that night at all. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way he'd looked at her. Not angry, not offended, just intrigued. Like he'd discovered something he hadn't realized he was searching for. She hated that her pulse still quickened at the thought. She hated even more that part of her had enjoyed standing up to him. By morning, she'd convinced herself it didn't matter. He was just another wealthy, self-important customer. She'd probably never see him again. But the city had other plans. 3 nights later, when she arrived for her dinner shift, the hostess met her at the staff door with a grin. Naomi, your boyfriend's back. My what? The man from Friday. Corner table, same seat. Asked for you by name. Naomi's stomach dropped. He remembered her name. She peeked out through the archway. There he was, seated in the same spot, black shirt this time, sleeves rolled to his elbows, forearms traced with ink that looked more like stories than tattoos. For a moment, she considered trading sections with another waitress. Then she straightened her apron, grabbed her notepad, and walked over. Good evening, Mr. Rossi, she said, keeping her voice even. Naomi, he said softly, like the name already belonged to him. Sit for a moment. I'm working. I know. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. A customer's request. Something in his tone wasn't a command, but it wasn't a suggestion either. Against her better judgment, she sat. Dante studied her for a moment before speaking. I came tonight to apologize. Naomi blinked. What? For the other night, he continued. I was rude. I made assumptions about your life without knowing anything about it. That was... He paused, searching for the word. Unacceptable. Naomi wasn't used to men like him apologizing. They justified, explained, deflected, but didn't simply admit fault. I suppose... Apology accepted, she said carefully. You suppose? Let's not make a habit of it. His mouth curved. Noted. He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. I also came because I have a proposition. She hesitated. I don't take bribes for better service. If that's what this is. Dante laughed quietly. No, this is business. Real business. He reached into his jacket and slid a sleek black card across the table. Rossi Foundation for Cultural Development, it read in embossed gold. I'm opening a new cultural center in Tribeca, he explained, a partnership between Italian institutions and American sponsors. I need a translator, someone who understands both languages, both cultures, someone who can read nuance. Naomi stared at him. Why me? I asked around, Dante said simply. Your manager mentioned you translate freelance. I did some checking. You checked on me? I vet everyone I hire. His gaze was steady. You're qualified. You're also Sicilian by blood, which matters to me. Naomi folded her arms. There are agencies that specialize in that kind of work. I met with 3. They're expensive, efficient, and completely soulless. He paused. You, on the other hand, you listen. You understand. When you translate, it's not just words, it's meaning. That's what I need. Her heart thudded, torn between suspicion and temptation. And what's in it for me? She asked. He named a figure, one that made her blink twice, per month. That was more than both her jobs combined. Naomi tried to keep her face neutral. That's generous. I don't offer anything less than fair, Dante replied calmly. Come to my office tomorrow, look over the contracts. If you're not interested, no hard feelings. She hesitated, fingers brushing the card. I'll think about it. That's all I ask. The corners of his mouth lifted in a faint smile. And, Naomi, his tone softened. Next time you call me Testa di Ferro, at least let me earn it first. Naomi left his table with her heart racing and her thoughts a tangled mess. That night she Googled him. Articles, charitable foundations, mentions of the Rossi family, described vaguely as influential figures in New York's Italian-American business community. That could mean anything. And in this city, it usually meant everything. Still, the next day, she found herself standing outside a building in Tribeca. Brick facade, marble lobby, her reflection trembling slightly in the glass doors. The office was nothing like she expected. Warm wood, Italian art, bookshelves filled with poetry and history, a faint scent of espresso in the air. Dante stood by the window when she entered, his suit jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, sunlight tracing the ink on his forearms. Naomi, he said, his voice softer here, without the armor of the restaurant. I'm glad you came. He showed her the documents, clean, detailed, legitimate. The project was real, a cultural bridge between Italy and the States, built on preservation and art. She scanned the papers carefully, testing for red flags, but found none. When she looked up, he was watching her, not impatiently, but with that same quiet curiosity that had unnerved her before. So? He asked. Naomi exhaled. You're really doing this? I am. And you really want me? I do, Dante said simply, because I don't just need someone who translates words. I need someone who understands meaning. It was the first time in a long time someone had said that to her, that her understanding mattered. Naomi took the pen he offered. When do I start? He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes. Monday. As she signed, a thought flickered through her mind. Quiet, uncertain, impossible to ignore. Sometimes opportunity doesn't knock. Sometimes it walks in wearing a suit and dares you to be brave. It's strange how the people who challenge us the most are often the ones who see what we've been hiding. Have you ever had someone recognize your worth before you did? Monday came faster than Naomi expected. She'd spent the weekend closing out shifts, typing resignation emails, and convincing herself she wasn't insane. People didn't just walk away from security, even small, suffocating security, for a stranger's promise. But every time she thought about backing out, she remembered Dante's words. I need someone who understands meaning. It wasn't just a job offer. It was the first time in years someone had looked at her and seen value, not as a waitress, not as a translator for hire, but as a person with insight, talent, and voice. So Monday morning, Naomi walked into the Rossi Foundation dressed in her best blazer, nerves steady but alert. The receptionist greeted her warmly. Mr. Rossi's expecting you. When she stepped into his office, Dante was already there. Sleeves rolled again, tie loosened, a mug of espresso in his hand. The sunlight cut across his face, highlighting a small scar at his temple she hadn't noticed before. He smiled when he saw her. You came. I said I would. He gestured toward the desk. Your workspace is ready. You'll have access to the digital archives, project drafts, and correspondence from our partners in Florence. Take your time settling in. It was surreal. The room was bright, filled with books and framed photographs. Italian villages, Sicilian coastlines, black and white portraits of artisans, a space that smelled like old paper, coffee, and possibility. Naomi sat, logged in, and began reading through the first set of documents: partnership agreements, artist bios, and government grant outlines, all in Italian. She was home. By noon, she'd forgotten her nerves completely. Her translator's instinct had kicked in, the deep focus that made hours disappear. She caught small but significant mistranslations in the previous drafts and flagged them for correction, Dante noticed. "You're fast," he said from across the room, genuinely impressed. "I'm thorough," Naomi replied without looking up. "Fast is a side effect," he chuckled quietly. "Remind me never to underestimate you." The day passed quickly. They reviewed her notes together, and Naomi was struck by how engaged he was. He didn't delegate. He didn't skim. He read everything, asked questions, and actually listened to her explanations. "This phrase here," she said, pointing to a line in the document. "It reads fine in English, but in Italian it implies ownership, not partnership. If we keep it that way, it might offend the cultural board." Dante leaned closer, scanning the page beside her. "You're right. We'll change it." She could smell the faint scent of sandalwood and citrus on him. It was distracting, not overpowering, just present enough to stir something she didn't want to name. When she looked up, he was already watching her. "What?" she asked. Trying to sound casual, he smiled faintly. "Nothing. I just like watching people who care about what they do." Naomi looked away, her pulse quickening again. By the end of the week, they'd fallen into a rhythm. Morning espresso, document reviews, occasional arguments about phrasing. Dante was demanding, but fair, sharp-minded, relentless about precision, but never condescending. He valued her input. He asked questions. He remembered her grandmother's sayings, her favorite author, her preference for one sugar in her espresso. It was infuriatingly human for a man who carried so much mystery. Friday afternoon, as she was packing up her laptop, he said, "You should come to the event tomorrow." "What event?" "A small gathering. Private donors, artists. We're previewing the project before the press gets wind of it." Naomi hesitated. "You mean your world?" He tilted his head. "Our world now, isn't it?" Her stomach tightened. "I'm not sure I fit in with that world, Dante." "You will," he said simply. "Besides, you'll be there as part of the team." There was no arrogance in his tone, just quiet certainty. Still, Naomi's instincts whispered caution. The next evening, she arrived at the Rossi family's hotel in Soho, a converted 19th century building glowing with gold light and polished marble. The event was smaller than she'd expected, but no less intimidating. Men in tailored suits, women in designer gowns, conversations floating in Italian and English, laced with wealth and strategy. Naomi stood near the entrance, clutching a glass of sparkling water, feeling like an observer in someone else's life. Then she saw him. Dante stood near the center of the room, speaking with a group of investors, looking every inch the man people whispered about. Controlled, elegant, unbothered. When his eyes found hers, his expression changed. The formality melted into something softer. He excused himself and crossed the room. "You came," he said, that same quiet satisfaction in his tone. "You didn't really give me a choice. I don't recall forcing you." "No," she said, smiling despite herself. "You just made it sound impossible to say no." "Same thing," he teased, and for a moment, the tension between them felt dangerously easy. As the evening unfolded, Naomi moved through the crowd, translating where needed, helping Dante navigate the mix of Italian and American conversations. Her nerves settled as she found her footing. But as the night wore on, something subtle shifted. A pair of older men approached Dante, polite smiles, sharp eyes. Their Italian was formal, layered with coded meanings. Naomi's translation instinct picked up on something that didn't belong in a business setting. Talk of shipments, timing, and trust. Dante's expression remained neutral, but his answers were cautious, deliberate. The men nodded and walked away. Naomi turned to him. "What was that?" "Business," he said lightly. "Not the kind you need to worry about." Her stomach tightened. Should I be worried? Dante looked at her then. Really looked, his eyes dark but unreadable. "No, you should trust that I don't bring danger into places I want to protect." He said it like a promise, but his tone carried something unspoken, an edge that made her heartbeat skip. That night, as Naomi rode home through the quiet Manhattan streets, his words replayed in her mind. I don't bring danger into places I want to protect. He hadn't said people. He'd said places. And for reasons she couldn't explain, that distinction haunted her. Sometimes opportunity feels like a door opening, but you can't tell yet if it leads to light or to fire. Have you ever trusted someone who made you feel safe and scared at the same time? The next few weeks blurred together. Deadlines, phone calls, late nights, laughter. Naomi hadn't realized how much she'd missed feeling useful, seen. Dante had a way of drawing out her strengths without saying much, of making her feel like her thoughts carried weight. But it wasn't just work anymore. It was the way he leaned against her desk when he spoke, or how his voice softened when he asked if she'd eaten. It was the quiet between their conversations that hummed with something unspoken. Still, there were questions, the kind Naomi didn't ask because she wasn't sure she wanted the answers. Once, she walked into the office early and found Dante standing by the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and sharp. Tell him to keep it clean, he was saying in Italian. No one touches anything until I say so. Capito? When he turned and saw her, his tone shifted instantly. Light, casual. Morning, Naomi. But the look in his eyes told another story. She hesitated at the doorway. Everything okay? Just logistics. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Naomi nodded and sat at her desk, but she couldn't shake the feeling that logistics was a word doing a lot of hiding. The next afternoon, she went to drop off a folder at the Foundation's storage room, an area she rarely entered. The door was slightly open. Inside, 2 men were moving boxes stamped with Italian shipping labels. Careful, one said. This one's not for customs. Naomi froze. Before she could back away, Dante appeared behind her. Naomi! She jumped, spinning around. I was just looking for the filing room? His voice was calm, but his gaze was unreadable. Yes. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. That room's off limits for now. Under renovation. Renovation, another word doing too much work. Understood, she said quietly. He studied her face for a moment, then softened. I'm not hiding anything that should worry you. Just trust me on that. I didn't say you were. You didn't have to. That evening, as she rode the subway home, Naomi tried to convince herself it didn't matter. Maybe it really was just logistics. Maybe she was reading too much into things. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, the one that always knew when something didn't sit right. When words and eyes don't match, child, believe the eyes. A week later, the Foundation hosted another meeting, this one smaller, in Dante's office after hours. He'd asked Naomi to stay and translate for 2 Italian delegates. The men arrived late, speaking in fast, coded Italian Naomi barely managed to keep up with. Their talk began with art shipments, but halfway through, one of them lowered his voice. Rossi, he said, there's talk in Palermo. A rival's getting bold. Maybe it's time you reminded people who your father was. Naomi froze mid-sentence. Dante's expression didn't change. My father's name isn't leverage, he replied evenly. We'll handle it quietly. The man shrugged. Quiet doesn't always work. Naomi pretended to be absorbed in her notes, translating their conversation into English without showing she understood too much. When the men left, Dante sat in silence, his jaw tight. Naomi spoke gently. You don't have to tell me what that was about. But, are you in danger? He exhaled, leaning back. No, it's just noise. The kind that never really dies when you come from certain families. She hesitated. Families like the Rossis? He looked at her then, tired, vulnerable, human. Yes, families like mine. Naomi nodded slowly. You could have told me. He smiled faintly. You'd have walked away. Maybe. Dante leaned forward, his voice quiet. And maybe that's the one thing I couldn't let happen. The air between them thickened, heavy with truth and something dangerously close to confession. Naomi didn't know what to say. She only knew that whatever line she'd drawn between his world and hers was beginning to blur. Later that night, she found herself replaying every moment they'd shared. The way he'd looked at her when she spoke, the rare warmth behind his defenses, the hints of something gentler beneath all that control. People called men like Dante cold, But she didn't see coldness. She saw weight, the burden of being feared and misunderstood at the same time. And maybe, just maybe, she saw a piece of herself in that. The following weekend, Dante invited her to a gallery event featuring pieces the foundation had sponsored. Naomi wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. Dante met her at the entrance, eyes sweeping over her with a quiet, appreciative warmth. "You clean up well," he murmured. "So do you," she said. He offered his arm. "Walk with me." They moved through the gallery together, pausing before a painting of a Sicilian coastline. The colors were wild, blue and gold colliding, waves clawing at the cliffs. "My mother used to paint," Dante said softly. "That's her hometown, Cefalù." Naomi glanced at him. "She was an artist?" He nodded. "Before she married my father. And after?" His smile thinned. "After she learned to survive instead." Naomi said nothing. The honesty in his tone told her enough. After a long moment, she said quietly, "Maybe that's why you do what you do. The foundation, the art. It's a way of giving her voice back." Dante turned to her, surprise flickering in his eyes before it softened into something deeper. "You see too much, Naomi. Maybe you hide too little," she whispered. Their eyes held for a heartbeat too long. The room around them blurred, and for the first time, Dante didn't look like the untouchable man everyone feared. He looked real. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. Every wall she'd built to keep her world safe was beginning to tremble. She told herself she was just working for him, translating, organizing, helping. But deep down, she knew she was already translating something else entirely. A man who spoke in silences and half-truths, and whose presence made her forget why she'd ever wanted distance in the first place. It's strange, isn't it? How you can sense someone's danger and still be drawn closer, as if your soul recognizes something your mind can't accept. Have you ever felt that pull? That beautiful, terrifying curiosity you couldn't walk away from? The rain hadn't stopped all morning. New York looked like it was dissolving behind a curtain of silver, and Naomi sat by her window, her thoughts scattered like the drops racing down the glass. It had been 2 months since she started working with Dante Rossi. 2 months of early mornings, late nights, and quiet moments that lingered too long. He'd become part of her rhythm, a constant she didn't realize she relied on until he stopped answering her calls that weekend. Friday, he'd left the office abruptly after a phone call, face tight, voice clipped. He'd said something about handling a situation, then vanished. No replies since, not to her emails, not even to her polite, "just checking in, hope all's well" message. Something inside her refused to sit still. By Sunday evening, that quiet unease had turned into a knot in her chest. Against her better judgment, she decided to go to the foundation office to drop off a file she'd been working on, a reason that was more excuse than necessity. When she arrived, the lobby lights were dim. The security guard nodded. "Mr. Rossi's in his office," he said. Her heart stuttered. "He's here?" The man nodded again. "Came in a few hours ago." Naomi took the elevator up. The doors opened to silence, the kind that feels heavy, secretive. Dante's office door was half closed, light spilling through the crack. She started to knock, then froze. Voices. 2 of them. Dante's, low, controlled. And another, a woman's, sharp and cold. "You can't keep doing this," the woman said in accented English. "You think your father's name still protects you, but it doesn't. The board in Palermo is watching. They see you pulling away from the family." "I'm not pulling away," Dante replied evenly. "I'm building something legitimate, something that doesn't rely on fear." "Legitimate?" she scoffed. "You think art and charity erase blood? You're your father's son, Dante. You always will be." Naomi's chest tightened. The family. Palermo. The implications hit like a slow, cold wave. Dante wasn't just from a family with power. He was part of it. And not the kind of power that came from politics or business. The kind whispered about. The kind that made people lower their voices. Naomi backed away slowly, her heartbeat a drum in her ears. The elevator doors opened behind her, and she slipped inside before she could hear more. That night, she sat in her apartment, trembling hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. He's Mafia. She'd suspected it. The coated Italian, the men with sharp eyes, the way people deferred to him. But hearing it confirmed, hearing him defend it, cracked something deep inside her. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to hate him, because in every moment she'd spent with him, he'd never been cruel, never threatening. He'd been kind, thoughtful, careful with her. Still, kindness didn't erase blood. The next morning, Dante called. "Naomi!" His voice was rough, quieter than usual. "Can you come in?" She hesitated. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "I need you here." He didn't explain, and for reasons she couldn't name, she went. When she entered his office, he was standing by the window again, suit jacket off, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "I owe you an apology," he said before she could speak. "For disappearing?" she asked, folding her arms. "For not telling you the truth sooner." Naomi's breath caught. "I know what you heard," he said quietly, "and you deserve an explanation." "Then give me one." He turned, meeting her eyes. "My father was Salvatore Rossi. He built his empire in Palermo in ways that weren't clean. I grew up in that world, learned its rules, its codes. When I came here, I swore I'd build something different, something good. The foundation was supposed to be that." Naomi's heart twisted. "But the people you work with, they're remnants," he said, his tone sharp with frustration. "Men who think I'm still part of it." "Who think I'll fall back into line? I won't!" "You're saying you're out. I'm saying I'm trying." Naomi looked at him, searching for deceit, but found only weariness. "So what happens when they realize you mean it?" Dante exhaled slowly. "That's what I'm trying to figure out." He sat down, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You shouldn't be near any of this. I work here, Dante. I can move you somewhere else." She shook her head. "You don't get to decide that." His eyes flicked up, a mix of irritation and admiration. "You really don't scare easily, do you?" "No," she said softly. "But I care easily, and that's worse." The silence that followed stretched, full of things neither of them could safely say. Then Dante stood, moving closer. "Naomi, if I've pulled you into something—" "You didn't pull me," she interrupted. "I walked in." Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, pride, maybe even gratitude. He reached for her hand, hesitated, then let it fall. "You should walk away, before this becomes something you can't walk out of." Naomi's voice was barely a whisper. Too late. That night she dreamed of her grandmother again, standing in a Sicilian field, wind in her hair, saying softly, "Love isn't blind, child. It just sees deeper than it should." Naomi woke with tears on her cheeks, because she knew what she felt wasn't safe, but it was real. The next day, news broke. A warehouse owned by the Rossi Foundation had caught fire overnight. No injuries reported. Investigators suspect arson. Dante didn't come into the office. Naomi's phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number. He's not who you think he is. Stay away before it's too late." Her pulse quickened. She texted back, "Who is this?" But the message failed to deliver. The fear she'd tried to ignore now had a heartbeat of its own. It's one thing to love someone's goodness, another to face their darkness and not run. Would you stay if the truth scared you? Or would you walk away to protect yourself? Naomi barely slept the night the message came. Every sound outside her window made her flinch. A car door, a siren, the creak of a pipe. By dawn, the city looked washed out, and she looked like someone who'd aged 10 years overnight. The news played quietly on her laptop. Authorities are investigating a suspicious fire linked to the Rossi Foundation. No official statement yet from founder Dante Rossi. Her stomach knotted. No official statement. That wasn't like him. She tried calling. Straight to voicemail. She tried again. Still nothing. By noon, she was pacing the small apartment, coffee untouched, mind spinning through possibilities. Maybe the message had been a scare tactic. Maybe it was real. Either way, she couldn't sit still. She threw on her coat and headed for the foundation building. When she arrived, the front desk was deserted. The usual receptionist was gone, replaced by a man in a black suit who didn't meet her eyes. "Mr. Rossi isn't available," he said flatly. "I'm his translator," Naomi insisted. "He'll want to see me." "I said he's not here." The tone left no space for argument. Naomi turned away, her pulse roaring in her ears. She took the elevator up anyway, stepping into a floor that felt wrong. Too quiet, Too still. Dante's office door stood open. Papers scattered across the floor. A drawer half pulled out, as if someone had left in a hurry. She knelt, picking up a photograph from under the desk. It was Dante and a woman with dark hair. His mother, maybe, smiling on a sun-bleached Sicilian street. Footsteps sounded behind her. "Naomi!" She turned. Dante stood in the doorway, jaw tight, coat draped over one arm. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that went deeper than sleep could fix. "What happened?" she demanded. "The warehouse, the message." He shut the door behind him. "You shouldn't be here." "You keep saying that," she said, her voice trembling. "But you never tell me why." Dante's eyes darkened. "Because the people I grew up with don't care who gets hurt when they send a message. And that warehouse wasn't an accident. It was a warning." "From who?" He hesitated. "Someone who thinks I forgot where I came from." Naomi swallowed hard. "And did you?" His silence was answer enough. He crossed to the desk, gathering papers with sharp movements. "I'm shutting the foundation down for now." "What? You can't." "I can, and I have to." Naomi stepped closer. "Dante, everything I've built is being used against me." His voice cracked through the room, raw and sudden, then softer, breaking at the edges. "I wanted this to be clean. I wanted to make something good, but every time I try, that world pulls me back." Naomi reached out, her voice steady despite the ache in her throat. "Then let me help." He looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time, she saw fear. Not for himself, for her. "You already have," he said quietly, "by staying away from it." He turned, grabbed his coat, and walked past her. "Dante, don't." He stopped at the door. "If you ever cared about me, Naomi, don't follow." Then he was gone. She stood in the empty office long after he'd left, the hum of the city filtering through the glass. On his desk sat a single folder she hadn't noticed before, marked Palermo, private files. Every instinct told her to leave it alone, but her heart wouldn't listen. Inside were letters, old ones, written in Italian, addressed to Salvatore Rossi. Among them, a single photograph of Dante as a teenager beside a man with the same eyes and a harder face. On the back, scrawled words in faded ink. "For the heir who will fix what I broke." She closed the folder, hands shaking. Whatever Dante was trying to run from, it was older and heavier than she'd imagined. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number again. She hesitated before answering. "Hello?" A man's voice, smooth, accented. "Miss Blake, you should mind your own business. The Rossi boy isn't who you think." Her heart pounded. "Who is this?" "Someone cleaning up his father's mess." "Do yourself a favor. Disappear." The line went dead. Naomi sank onto the bed, the fear finally catching up to her. She wanted to call the police, but what would she say? That the man she worked for, the man she might be falling for, was trapped in something she didn't understand? 3 days passed. No sign of Dante. No answers. Then, late Thursday night, a black car pulled up outside her building. For one wild second, she thought it was him, until the passenger window rolled down and she saw a stranger's face. "Miss Blake," the driver said politely, "Mr. Rossi requests your presence." Her pulse thudded. "Where?" He opened the rear door. "You'll see." Every part of her screamed no, but fear mixed with longing in equal measure, and she climbed in. The car wound through the city until they reached the waterfront, an abandoned pier lit only by a few yellow streetlights. Dante was there, standing by the water, coat whipping in the wind. When she stepped out, he turned. His face softened instantly, as if he hadn't expected she'd actually come. "I told you not to follow," he said. "You also told me to trust you," she shot back. "You don't get to pick which part I listen to." He almost smiled. Almost. Then his expression sobered. "I needed to see you before I disappear for a while." Her chest tightened. "Disappear?" "There's a meeting in Palermo. If I don't go, they'll keep coming for everyone around me." Naomi's throat closed. "You mean me?" Dante didn't answer, but the look in his eyes said everything. "Don't do this," she whispered. "I have to. It's the only way to end it." Naomi stepped closer, her voice breaking. "Then promise me you'll come back." He reached for her hand, pressed it to his chest. "If there's a way, I'll find it." Then he leaned forward and kissed her, soft, desperate, final. The kind of kiss that feels like both a beginning and a goodbye. When he pulled away, his voice was barely a whisper. "Stay safe, Naomi." And then he was gone, swallowed by the night, leaving her standing in the rain with the taste of salt and goodbye on her lips. Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about believing someone will find their way back through the dark. Have you ever had to trust someone enough to let them go, even when every part of you wanted to stay? The days after Dante left felt hollow, a silence that seemed to stretch through every part of Naomi's life. She went to work out of habit, but the office was different now. The air felt stale, the walls too still. The foundation's projects were suspended, its staff cut down to a skeleton crew. Every morning, Naomi opened her email hoping for a message. Every night, she closed her laptop knowing she wouldn't find one. At first, the waiting consumed her. Then the worry hardened into resolve. She refused to be just a footnote in someone else's unfinished story. One evening, while sorting through old project files, she noticed something odd. A folder labeled Shipment Records, private, tucked inside the archive drive. It shouldn't have been there. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were scanned customs forms, tracking IDs, and handwritten notes in Italian. At first glance, they looked legitimate, until she spotted a pattern. Every few shipments listed identical contents under different sender names. She translated one, then another. The words chilled her. Antiquità, bronzi del sexto secolo. Antiquities, bronze relics from the 6th century. These weren't art pieces meant for exhibition. They were smuggled cultural artifacts, and they were being moved under the Foundation's name. Her stomach turned. Someone's using his foundation to move stolen art. It wasn't Dante's work. The files went back months before he'd even hired her. But someone had been covering their tracks behind the facade he'd built to do good. Naomi printed copies and stuffed them into her bag, hands shaking. If she could prove this, she could clear him, maybe even save him. The next morning, she reached out to the only person she thought might know more. Maria, the Foundation's former accountant, who'd quit abruptly 2 weeks before Naomi joined. They met at a quiet cafe on the Lower East Side. Maria looked nervous, eyes darting around. "You shouldn't have called me," she whispered. "I just want the truth," Naomi said. "About what was happening in the Foundation." Maria hesitated, then exhaled. "The shipment started under Salvatore Rossi. When Dante took over, he didn't know, at least not at first. The old men, they used his name, his connections. When he found out, he tried to stop them. That's when things got dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Maria's hands trembled as she stirred her coffee. "One of his father's men was found dead in Palermo. They said it was business. But everyone knew. Someone was sending a message. Dante tried to protect his people here. That's why he shut everything down." Naomi felt a surge of grief and determination twist together. "Then he's walking into something he can't win." Maria's eyes softened. "He'll fight. That's what Rossi men do. But they rarely come back clean." That night, Naomi sat on her couch surrounded by printouts and notes. Her apartment looked like an evidence room. She mapped every shipment, every name, every date, until the lines formed a pattern that led to one name she hadn't seen before. Leonardo Vescari. The name appeared in almost every document, sometimes as sender, sometimes receiver. A ghost threading through the paperwork. She searched the name online. A handful of news articles appeared. An Italian investor, philanthropist, and, according to a smaller report from Palermo, suspected associate of organized smuggling operations tied to the Rossi family. Naomi leaned back, her heartbeat quickening. If Dante was in Palermo meeting with the board, and Vescari was one of them, he wasn't walking into a meeting. He was walking into a trap. The thought ignited something fierce inside her. Fear melted into purpose. Every ounce of helplessness she'd felt since he left turned into fuel. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through her contacts, until she found the number for the cultural attaché she'd met at one of the Foundation's events. A quiet man named Giovanni Rizzo. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Blake? This is a surprise." "I need your help," she said quickly. "It's about Dante Rossi and stolen Sicilian antiquities." There was a pause. Where are you getting this information? I have documents. Proof. They're using his name. Another pause. Then, bring everything you have, now. An hour later, Naomi was sitting in a small office near the Italian consulate explaining everything. The files, the names, the warehouse fire. Giovanni listened silently, taking notes. When she finished, he said quietly, Miss Blake, what you're describing isn't just theft. It's organized trafficking of cultural property. Interpol has been tracking this network for years. Then you can stop it, Naomi said. He looked at her kindly. We can try, but if Mr. Rossi's where you say he is, he may already be in deeper than we can reach. Naomi's heart clenched. Then send me! Giovanni blinked. You? I speak the language, I know the people, and he trusts me. He hesitated. Miss Blake, this isn't a translation assignment. I know, she said, her voice steady. But I'm not just going to sit here and wait to see if the man I love makes it out alive. Something in her conviction silenced him. Finally, he nodded. All right, he said softly. But if you go, you'll have to follow my lead. No improvising. Naomi exhaled. Deal. That night, as the plane lifted off the runway, she stared out the window at the shrinking skyline of New York, her city, her chaos, her comfort zone. Below her, clouds swallowed the lights. Ahead of her, a country she'd only known through stories, and a man she couldn't let disappear into legend. Her grandmother's voice whispered in her mind again, warm and steady. When your heart knows the truth, don't let fear do the talking. Naomi smiled faintly. For the first time in weeks, she felt clear. Whatever waited in Sicily, danger, betrayal, or redemption, she was ready. Because sometimes love isn't about being safe. It's about being sure. There's a moment when fear stops mattering, when what's at stake is too important to run from. Have you ever taken a risk you knew could change everything, just because your heart wouldn't let you stay still? The flight to Sicily landed just before dawn. The sky was the color of pewter, the air heavy with the scent of sea salt and olive trees. Naomi stepped onto the tarmac and felt something ancient settle in her chest, as if the land itself was whispering that she'd come back to a place her blood remembered, even if her mind didn't. Giovanni met her with 2 local officers. He handed her a small folder of documents stamped with official seals. These give you clearance to accompany me to the meeting point, he said. But Naomi, if things turn bad, you run. You don't argue. She nodded, clutching the folder like a lifeline. They drove for hours along narrow coastal roads, winding through cliffs and olive groves until the car stopped outside a secluded villa overlooking the sea. Naomi's pulse thundered. Even from the car, she could see black vehicles parked in a semicircle outside. Men in suits. Security. Dante was here. Inside the villa, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Voices low, words sharp and guarded. Giovanni showed his credentials and stepped aside to negotiate access. Naomi caught fragments of conversation in Italian. Trust, loyalty, betrayal, blood. Then she saw him. Dante stood at the center of a long oak table, surrounded by 6 men. He looked different, sharper, colder, wearing the kind of stillness that comes from knowing one wrong word could end everything. Her heart lurched. He turned slightly, and for a moment, their eyes met across the room. The flicker of shock in his expression was small but unmistakable. Then it softened, a whisper of disbelief, of something that looked a lot like relief. Naomi wanted to run to him, but Giovanni's hand gripped her wrist. Not yet, he murmured. The meeting continued. Voices clashing, papers slamming onto the table. An older man with a white beard spoke sharply. You've forgotten who you are, Dante. You think hiding behind art and culture makes you clean? You dishonor your father's name. I honor it by doing better, Dante said calmly. By building something that doesn't depend on fear. You call this better? Another sneered. You let outsiders, journalists, governments, crawl into our business. Business? Dante's tone darkened. You mean smuggling relics from churches? Selling history like it's scrap metal? You disgrace the country, not preserve it. A murmur rippled through the room. Naomi's breath caught. This was it. The heart of everything. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Before Giovanni could stop her, she stepped forward. He's telling the truth! The room froze. All eyes turned toward her, a foreign woman standing in the doorway, trembling but unyielding. Dante's face went pale. Naomi, what are you doing here? I found the files, she said, voice steady. The shipments, the fake records. The proof that your father's legacy was being used for theft, not heritage. One of the men, tall, bald, with a scar across his cheek, sneered. Who is she? Dante moved in front of her instantly. She's not part of this. She is now, the man said, pulling a pistol from his coat. Naomi froze. The air in the room cracked open like glass. Dante's voice dropped to steel. Put it down, Vescari. Vescari's mouth curved into a cruel half-smile. You bring police, foreigners, and now lovers into our business, and still think you can walk away? Giovanni stepped forward, raising his badge. Leonardo Vescari, you're under investigation by Interpol for illegal trafficking of cultural artifacts. The villa is surrounded. Drop your weapon. Chaos erupted. Shouts in Italian. Movement everywhere. The sound of boots, metal, and fear. Vescari turned the gun toward Dante, but Naomi moved before she could think. No! She cried, shoving Dante aside as the shot rang out. The world went white. When the ringing in her ears faded, she realized she was on the floor. Dante's arms around her, his voice breaking as he shouted her name. Naomi, stay with me! Stay with me! She blinked up at him, dazed. I'm okay, she whispered. And it was true. The bullet had missed, splintering the wood inches from where she'd been standing. Officers stormed in, wrestled Vescari to the ground, confiscated weapons. The chaos blurred, shouting, sirens, the thud of footsteps, but all Naomi could hear was Dante's voice. Why would you do that? He rasped. Because you'd have done the same for me. He stared at her, shaking his head in disbelief. You shouldn't have come here! Naomi managed a faint smile. Then I guess we're both terrible at following orders. Hours later, the villa was quiet again. Vescari and his men were in custody. Giovanni and the officers had gathered statements and evidence. The sky outside was turning gold over the sea, and Naomi sat on the terrace wrapped in a blanket, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. Dante came out silently, a faint bruise darkening his jaw. He sat beside her without speaking for a long time. Finally, he said softly, You could have died. So could you, she whispered back. He exhaled slowly, eyes on the horizon. I thought I could walk away from that world by pretending it didn't exist. But you were right. Hiding isn't the same as healing. Naomi turned to him. So what now? I cooperate with the authorities. I tell them everything. It's the only way to end this. She nodded, eyes stinging. And after that? He looked at her then, the storm gone from his eyes, replaced by something clear and steady. After that, he said, I start over, if you'll still want to be part of that world. Naomi smiled faintly. I didn't come this far to stop now. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers, hesitant, reverent. You saved me, you know. No, she whispered. You saved yourself. I just reminded you who you were trying to be. Dante's lips curved, a soft, almost disbelieving smile. He leaned in, his voice barely a breath. Say that again. Naomi laughed quietly, tears glinting at the corners of her eyes. Which part? The part where you remind me who I am. So she did, with a look, a touch, and a silence that spoke louder than words ever could. Sometimes the people we meet don't change us. They uncover the strength that was buried there all along. Have you ever realized you were stronger because someone finally saw you clearly? 6 months later, the world had changed. Not with explosions or headlines, but with the quiet steadiness that comes after a storm finally breaks. The Rossi Foundation reopened under a new name, the Rinaldi Cultural Trust. Giovanni had helped restructure it as an independent organization overseen by international heritage boards. What was once a shadowed empire of power and influence was now something transparent, rooted in preservation and truth. Naomi stood in the newly renovated gallery in Tribeca, sunlight pouring through the tall windows, reflecting off restored bronze relics that had finally been returned to Italy. She traced her fingers over the plaque on the wall, in honor of those who believed that redemption is a form of art. Her eyes softened. She'd written that line herself. Behind her, a familiar voice broke the silence. You still like quoting poets on walls, huh? Naomi turned, and there he was. Dante Rossi. No suit this time, no guarded expression. Just a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly longer than before, a small scar tracing his temple. A reminder of the life he'd left behind. She smiled. It fits, doesn't it? He stepped closer, his voice lower now. It fits you. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The city noise hummed faintly outside, but inside the gallery, time seemed to stand still. You really did it, she said softly. You rebuilt everything. He shook his head. We rebuilt it. You didn't let me drown in guilt. You pulled me out when I didn't think I deserved to breathe. Naomi looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. You deserved peace, Dante. You just didn't know what it looked like. He smiled faintly. And you did? Maybe not, but I knew how to recognize it when it finally showed up. They walked through the gallery together, pausing before a small section dedicated to Sicilian art. A painting hung there, a coastline, blue and gold colliding under an endless sky. Naomi smiled when she saw it. Your mother's work. Dante nodded. It was found in storage during the investigation. I had it restored. She'd be proud. He looked at the painting for a long time before answering. I hope so. Naomi turned toward him. You know, your name still carries weight in Palermo. He gave a quiet laugh. Let them talk. For once, I'm not running from it. I'm rewriting what it means. Her heart swelled. You always were meant to rebuild, not destroy. And you, he said, his tone warm and sure, were always meant to be more than what the world expected of you. Their eyes met, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them flinched from the future. Outside, the spring air was soft, filled with the scent of rain and city dust. They stepped out together, walking along the quiet cobblestone street. Naomi stopped suddenly. Can I ask you something? Always. When you left that night, when you said you might not come back? She hesitated. What made you decide to fight instead of disappear? He looked at her then, the corners of his mouth lifting. You. She blinked. Me? Dante nodded. You said something before I left. That hiding isn't the same as healing. I'd been running my whole life, Naomi. You made me stop long enough to realize I didn't want to be another ghost in my father's story. Naomi smiled softly. You weren't born to be a ghost, Dante. You were born to break the cycle. He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. And what about you? Still translating the world one sentence at a time? More or less, she said with a laugh. Except now I actually get to write some of my own. He smiled. You always were the better storyteller. Maybe, she teased. But you're still the better mystery. They walked in silence for a while, until the wind picked up, playful, carrying the scent of salt from the harbor. Naomi tilted her face toward the sky. It smells like Sicily. Dante looked at her. Maybe one day I'll take you there properly. Not for meetings or chaos, just for peace. She smiled. I'd like that. He grinned, a spark of mischief returning. You'd have to learn how to slow down, though. Sicilians don't rush through sunsets. Naomi raised an eyebrow. Neither do people who've been given second chances. He laughed softly, slipping his hand fully into hers. Then maybe we finally have time to watch one. As they reached the corner, Naomi stopped again. Dante? He turned. She smiled faintly. Remember the first thing I ever said to you? He pretended to think. You mean the insult? Or the part where you told me off about rent and bills? The insult, she said, laughing. Testa di ferro arrogante. Dante chuckled, shaking his head. I'll never forget it. Good, Naomi said, her voice softening. Because maybe that was the only language honest enough to get your attention. He took a step closer, his voice low and teasing. Then say it again, but this time, looking at me. Naomi smiled, the same quiet defiance she'd had that first night, and whispered, Testa di ferro arrogante. Dante grinned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And you're still the only one I'll ever let get away with saying it. They walked on together as the sun dipped low over the skyline. Two souls who had walked through fire and found something gentler on the other side. Naomi glanced up at him, her hand still in his. Maybe redemption, she said quietly, isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's about finally being honest. Dante squeezed her hand, his voice steady. Then we've both earned it. And with that, they kept walking. No longer hiding, no longer haunted. Just two people who had learned that love, when it's real, doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. Sometimes the people we meet don't save us. They remind us who we were meant to be all along. Tell me, have you ever met someone who helped you find your way back to yourself? Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.